Hey guys, welcome back to Scrap Mechanic and what I'm calling Flight School, I guess. We're back with this horrible plane, but we're going to make it a lot better. So we are going to add control surfaces, go over how those work. So we have our ailerons that we added in before to make it absolutely bare minimum controllable. We're going to add in elevators, which are going to be independently controlled, and then we are going to add in a rudder, which is actually going to be linked up to our ailerons, so you don't have to worry about that because you only have really two control axes, unless you want to set up some buttons. But yeah, we'll go over that and then try and make the trim system a little bit better. Fix this, we'll add some better landing gear, and then we'll have ourselves a better plane. So the first thing we're going to do is take a look at how control surfaces actually work. So if you remember back to the first episode where I showed you how angle of attack works on wings, if you look here, this is a pretty shallow angle of attack compared to what the plane can do. But if we hold down D, which would make us bank to the right, you can see the outer wing increases its angle of attack, which would increase its lift. But if we look over to the left, this actually has a negative angle of attack, so that's pulling the wing down. This is ridiculously aggressive, so what we should actually do is take a look at these bearings and turn the angle way down, because this is really snappy. So we'll keep it at about 9 degrees. There we go, that's much better. So you don't actually need that much of a difference unless you're, about to crash into a mountain, but hopefully you don't do that, all right? So next up, we want the same thing for pitch. We want to be able to pitch the aircraft up and down on demand, because right now, if you are about to crash into the ground or fly into the mountain, you need to wait for the trim to react, which can be very slow because it's pretty precise, which means it'll slowly act over time, but if you really need to pitch up like really fast, it's not going to do you much good. So what we need to do is control the angle of attack of the rear fin to be able to change the dynamic balance of the aircraft. To do this, I'm actually going to completely rip out the wings because we want them to be about the same size, but we need to split it. So we are going to get some thinner wings. So we'll get that, and then just to be fancy, we will put on an end cap. So we will put on these 3 wings right here, and this is actually going to be our elevator, and then I'll put on a bearing, and then this is going to be our trim tabs, because you don't need quite as much trim, because you saw this thing flew pretty well with only about 3 degrees on it. So we will, oh, that's interesting. Didn't know you could do that, but there you go, we'll just switch those over, and so now that is going to be our trim, so these are going to be trimmed relative to the wing. And then, no, it didn't actually carry over, this is going to be trimmed relative to the vertical stabilizer. Horizontal stabilizer. So that looks good. And now comes the slightly complicated part. We are going to have to deal with smart engines. They're a little bit complicated, but it's actually not that bad if you take your time and look at it carefully. So we have 4 inputs that we could use. We only actually need 2. We want the speed and the target angle, and these are changed by inputting numbers through this counter. So if we get a counter, put 2 of them there, and we need to paint one of them white. So this white is going to be the speed at which it reacts. Right now that's 0. And then this one, which can be any other color, this is the angle that it wants to get us to. And actually, that's not what we want. I forgot. We actually want a math block. Don't worry, we don't need to do math here. All we need to do is go into this. Ooh, that's new. Sorry, I haven't looked at this mod in a while. We just go to page 3 here, and then we get a WS converter, which is amazing. So this basically just takes the input from the seat and it converts it into a WS motion. Ooh, I forgot that was still connected. We'll just disconnect these because we want WS now to be attributed with this. And now we do need a tiny bit of math. We'll just get multiplication, and then we will get our number block right here. I will also take out a tick button. We'll get our number block here, and then we just multiply this with the angle that we want it to be at. So let's say we want a probably 10-degree deflection. So we'll go to our paint tool, select this red right here, this one. This is connected into that, and then we just hit it once, and that is 10 degrees. Now for the speed, we want this to be quite high, but not ridiculously high, so we will go maybe 300, something like that. All right, now let's see. There you go. That's not correct. So this is me holding S. We want it to pitch up when we hold S, which means that this side is correct and this side is incorrect. So we will just flip that. There you go. So now holding S, that will pitch us up, and then holding W, that will pitch us down. There we go. So that is elevator. All right, now we need to take a look at the roll a little bit closer. So the roll does work right now, but there's a bit of a problem. Do you see when I do bank to the right, the angle of attack increases there, we get more lift, great. The angle of attack decreases here, we get less lift, that's wonderful, that will make us roll. But with more angle of attack also comes more drag. So if I bank to the right, this will increase the angle of attack, which will also increase the drag, which will drag this wing backwards. Same thing here. If this decreases the angle of attack, there will be less drag, so it won't be pulled back as much, which will make it look like it shoots forwards, which means if we bank to the right, we will actually yaw to the left. We don't really want that, so what we're going to do is replace our vertical stabilizer with vertical stabilizer and a rudder. And then we'll connect this up here. We'll just reduce the angle a little bit. You do need a decent amount, or actually no, you don't need that much rudder. So we'll go like 8 degrees. These angles, of course, they're just random. We'll actually tune them a bit finer later on. So now if we were holding down D, this would make us bank to the right, but it would make us yaw to the left. Right now, this rudder, if we look at it from this side, the wind is hitting there, which will try and knock it that way, which will make us yaw to the left. So this is actually making it worse, so we need to reverse that right there. And there we go. So now it's going, it should go in the same direction as the wheel. So that is called adverse yaw, which is when you get yaw from a place that you didn't really want it. You would normally have to compensate with a rudder like dynamically as the speed changes, because the slower you are, the more effective or more destructive, I guess, adverse yaw is. But we don't really have a way of controlling that, so we'll just add it in sort of like that, which is good enough now. So now we have bank compensating for the yaw, and we have pitch. All right, next we've got to fix up these wheels. Yeah, as you can see, if we decide to move at like faster than 2 kilometers an hour, it's pretty bumpy. And we don't really want that because we don't want the plane to get knocked up into the air. So what we'll do is we'll add in some proper landing gear. Now for this landing gear, I'm actually going to make it retractable as well, because, the gear being down doesn't really look that good, and also that brings the center of mass down, which isn't that bad of a thing, but that means that we need to have the thrust lower down, which isn't really all too good. So we will put some bearings here, and then we will add in our wheels. And then onto these wheels, or onto these pipes, we will add suspension, because, my gosh, do we need that. And there we go. Oh, Yeah, that's not happy. Alright, we will just connect this into the controller for now. And there we go. We can increase the stiffness. You know what? We'll just get some nice suspension. Yeah, right there, and actually I will add one more notch to this. And there we are, now it's setting a lot nicer. And now that we actually have pitch, it's going to be a lot easier to take off, because we don't need to worry about it getting all the way up to speed for it to lift up. I'm pretty sure I can actually drop this rear wheel as well. So if we just bring this back in, and you don't really need suspension on the rear wheel because it's a lot smaller and not as much of the weight of the aircraft is actually sitting on it, so the shock absorber won't actually do that much. And so if we just get a tiny, tiny little wheel, a wheel which is the same size as the bearings, yeah, that should work. And now if we just remove our thrust, and we will put it back here, and I will actually get one of these guys, the Pico thrusters, because they look a lot cleaner, and we actually don't need that much thrust because we have a drag reducer. This thing, you know, isn't flying through jello. Alright, so we will try and fly this thing now. Right, so now, right, if we try and use thrust, we also pitch forward, which is not a good thing. So we want to, we'll use this. We want a throttle, oh my gosh, a throttle lever, so that we don't need to pitch forwards every time we want to add thrust. So there we go. Now this should work better. As you can see, it's slower to accelerate, but that doesn't matter, and that suspension is actually quite a bit too stiff. There we go. Still a little bit stiff, but that's all right. Whoop. Okay. So, I forgot to set up a system to retract the landing gear, but you can see now we would be absolutely screwed if we didn't have an elevator, but now we can pitch up. Alright, and we can pitch down, and we can roll left and right. So yeah, we'll land this and we'll tune it up. So the first thing that I want to do is actually make this landing gear retractable. So we will get ourselves a switch, and then we'll put it right here, and then connect it into this controller. We don't need these to move, we just need to move the landing gear. So if we actually make this go fast and then bring it in maybe about 45 degrees for now. That is backwards. We could probably go a bit more. A little bit more. Tiny bit more. 70 degrees. If we bring it in too far, then it will hit there, and then we'll get a suspension glitch, actually, which is not ideal. So now we have retractable landing gear. Here we go. Alright, next on the list is fine-tuning this thing. So, it technically flies not too well, though. I noticed that the suspension is still a little bit stiff. So we can take that down another notch. Fortunately, it's ridiculously light. So there we go. It wobbles a little bit, but it doesn't go horribly off. Whoop. That's another issue. Tail draggers like to ground loop like this, where they never want to go in a straight line, because the center of pressure is forwards of the center of mass. But, oh well. So we'll just hope that we go in a straight line, and, close enough. Okay, so, if we take our landing gear in, this actually flies pretty well. Our trim is a little bit off. We need a bit more nose-up trim, and we could probably actually remove that weight in the nose. So we'll go home and do that. Alright, there we go. We have it trimmed now to 5 degrees of nose up, and I've removed the weight in the front, and I'm actually going to increase the thrust a little bit, because it is a bit sluggish to get off the ground. And so now the tail lifts up, and then we can just nose up. It's still pretty nose heavy, so we will actually take that trim and increase it a bunch. But if we take in the landing gear, it's actually pretty close. So we will actually make this trim dynamic. So once we take in the landing gear, it's going to change the trim. I'm also going to extend the wings a little bit because they are a bit, or the trim tabs, because they are a little bit short. Alright, now let's see how this flies. There we go, quite a bit more stable with the landing gear out. I'd want it to fly a little bit slower because this is going to be our landing configuration, our takeoff configuration, so we want it to fly at a much slower airspeed. But if we take in the landing gear, you can see the trim reduces, which compensates for the landing gear moving backwards. And this is actually a pretty good airspeed to fly at. So I'm pretty happy with where the trim is once the landing gear is tucked in. But we will just make it a bit more nose up for when it's out. Alright, so we will add another 5 degrees of nose up. And this should be a lot better. And now you saw there when I was approaching, going a little bit too fast, which is a bit of a problem because, you know, if you're going too fast, you don't want to have to do a million circles to get down. So I'm going to add in an air brake. You might, if you're into aviation, you might be wondering, hey, why don't you add in some flaps? Flaps don't really work in this game, and they're not really useful because flaps, they're not just for drag, they're also for additional lift. But the problem is, this thing has infinite angle of attack. This thing just doesn't stall, so there's no real point in flaps because flaps reduce your stall speed so that you can touch down slower, but you just pitch up in this. Maybe for like a tail dragger like this, you might argue that you want a slightly lower nose attitude, but something like this already flies pretty slowly, and the wings don't shear off if you go too fast, so it doesn't really matter all too much. So we will just connect these up to the controller. So 1 and 2 go forwards, 3 and 4 go backwards by double that. We get a switch. Do we have a normal switch? No. We get a switch, put it in there, activate it, and we want to flip these. There we go. So that goes down, that goes up, that goes down, that goes up. Doesn't really matter which ones go down and up so long as they're equal. And then we connect this up to the seat, and this should be a lot better. Now we have a lot more nose-up trim for taking off. Ooh. There we go, so now this pitches up quite nicely once we are going fast enough, and then we take in the landing gear, and then it flies at a much faster speed. But if we're going too fast, we can deploy the air brakes, and that will slow us down rather quickly. I would actually like those to move a little bit faster. And just flying like that, I noticed that the pitch is a little bit aggressive, and we're actually nose up a little bit too much with the cruise setting, with the gear up. So I will make that a little bit lower, and then I will reduce the speed at which this moves. There we go, that looks a little bit better. So now this should fly a little more stably at high speed. There we go. Plane flies pretty good. And if we're on approach here and we're like, oh, we're too high and we're too fast, we just deploy the air brakes and take them in. And hey, there you go. Actually, I would like to change those air brakes up a little bit. I will make them a little bit shallower and make them go as fast as possible. Let's see if we can land on this tiny little island over here. Ooh. Nope, nope, nope. Go around. Go around. Yeah, no, that's not gonna happen. At least not with that speed. Whoop. There we go. Nice soft landing. Yeah, there we go. Much better aircraft. So there we go, a much better plane. Before we had absolutely no pitch control, no adverse yaw. Actually, I'm gonna show you what adverse yaw looks like. So if we get up to a pretty slow speed here, and actually I'm gonna get a bit more altitude. If we go to a pretty slow speed and then try and bank. If we bank to the right, you can see the nose goes to the left just a little bit. And that's being deadened by the rudder. So if we actually slow down here, said slow down. There we go. And if we were to just basically turn this off and then go flying again, we'll get it really slow this time. Basically just stall it. I'll show you if we try and roll to one side, like this. If I try and roll to the right, you see the nose goes to the left first, and then, okay, you know, we'll get stabilized here. There we go. So if we try and slow down, try and bank to the left, nose goes to the right. Try and bank to the right, nose goes to the left a little bit. It's surprisingly tame on this plane. Usually if you get a lot slower of a plane, because this plane doesn't want to fly all too fast, but if you get a really slow plane, then they won't actually behave if you stall it. If you try and bank to the right, it'll very slowly bank to the right, and it'll just whip off to the left. So adverse yaw is more important on slower planes, so for this, I'll actually turn it down to about 5 degrees. There we go. That's better. So yeah, there you go. Slightly better plane than before. There could still be a few things that you can improve on. Yeah, go ahead and try and build it yourself, fly around, and have fun with it. Yeah, good luck, and I'll see you next time.